Okay, welcome back. You've handed us some genuinely mind-bending source material today, and we are ready to dive into something you probably haven't considered before. We're talking about combining, well, ancient celestial observation with something as grounded and, frankly, grim as criminal investigation.
It's quite a perspective, isn't it? Presented in these excerpts you shared from a book called Cosmic Detective: The Art of Finding Cosmic Evidences. The whole premise is using what's called criminal astrology. Yes, you heard that right, to analyze unseen patterns and influences around crime scenes and major events.
Criminal astrology, a cosmic detective. Okay, let's unpack this a bit. My first thought is, how can something happening way up there possibly relate to something happening down here in sort of specific kind of dark way?
Right, and that connects directly to the core principle the source really lays out, drawing on that old Hermetic idea. What is above is below. Look, the vision here isn't about replacing forensic science. You absolutely still need the fingerprints, the witness statements, all that. But the cosmic detective idea adds another layer. It involves examining the astrological chart for the precise moment of the event. You look at where the planets are, the moon phases, specific angles called declinations, even asteroids, believe it or not. The goal is to find potential patterns, timing cues, maybe insights into motive, method, or opportunity that standard police work might, miss. It's framed very clearly as a way to uncover cosmic clues, not as something that delivers courtroom-ready proof.
Okay. So it's like an additional source of intelligence, maybe, a different angle.
Exactly. It's presented as a supplemental tool for inquiry. Definitely not a substitute for the justice system or traditional investigation.
That makes sense. Now, the source really hammers home right away that the absolute first step, the whole foundation for casting this crime chart, is getting the time exactly right.
Oh, absolutely. It's non-negotiable. The author is adamant about this.
And here's where it gets really interesting for me. They say approximately 3:30 p.m. just won't cut it. Why? Why is getting the time down to the minute, even the second, so critical in this technique?
Okay, so it's because the sign that's rising on the eastern horizon at that exact moment, that's called the ascendant, is crucial. In these crime charts, the ascendant represents the victim. And the thing is, the zodiac sign on the ascendant can change really fast, like by a degree every 4 minutes. So if your time is off by even, say, 5 or 10 minutes, you could have a completely different sign rising, which means you're fundamentally misidentifying the victim in the chart's symbolism. And that could throw off your entire analysis,
Wow. Okay, so the time literally locks in who the chart is focused on, victim-wise.
Precisely. Getting that time right is paramount. And the source gives practical tips for this. Things like checking security camera timestamps, verifying the exact minute emergency services were called or arrived on scene. It requires that same diligent legwork a traditional detective does, following the trail, to piece together the precise timeline. Sometimes a seemingly minor detail from, say, a witness report online can help nail down that critical moment.
Okay, so you've done the legwork, you've got the precise time, you've cast the chart. What are the main celestial actors you're focusing on then? What jumps out first?
Right. The most important points are the ascendant, the ask, and the descendant. The deast, they're directly opposite each other in the chart. As we said, the ascendant represents the victim. The descendant logically represents the suspect or the perpetrator. So the plan is that rule the signs sitting on those points, they become your primary indicators. The moon is also generally considered an auxiliary indicator of the victim, unless Cancer happens to be on that ascendant or descendant axis, that its role changes slightly.
And I noticed the source says they focus specifically on these angular points, the ascendant-descendant axis, more than maybe traditional house placements. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, that's right. Based on the author's study of, numerous cases, they found that looking at the aspects, the angles between planets, and the condition of the rulers of the ascendant and descendant, especially how they relate to those angular points themselves, offered the most reliable insights and correlations in crime charts that seem more consistent.
Okay. Speaking of rulers, the source mentions using modern rulerships. That means Pluto rules Scorpio alone, and Neptune rules Pisces alone. My understanding is traditionally it's Mars sharing Scorpio with Pluto and Jupiter sharing Pisces with Neptune. What's the thinking behind going strictly modern here?
Yeah, the author uses a pretty good analogy for this. They say, just like you update your phone's software, astrology should evolve as we discover more about the cosmos. They argue that while, Mars fit Scorpio before Pluto was known, Pluto's core themes, depth, intensity, death, and rebirth, obsession, they capture the essence of Scorpio much, much better than Mars's more straightforward energy. And similarly, Neptune's associations with illusion, addiction, chaos, confusion, those resonate more strongly with Pisces' darker potential than Jupiter's expansive quality. So they advocate for using these single modern rulers for, well, a potentially more precise analysis in this specific, often darker context.
Huh. Seeing it as an update based on new knowledge? That's a practical way to frame it. Okay, so you've got the chart set up, you know the rulers. Are there any quick clues you look for right away? Things that might hint at the potential outcome of the case?
Yeah, there are definitely some immediate indicators you check. For instance, if benefic planets, that's Jupiter or Venus, the good guys astrologically, are making strong, easy aspects to the ascendant or its ruler, that's often seen as a more favorable sign for the victim. It might suggest survival or recovery of remains, or maybe just that the truth will come out more easily. Also, where planets like Mercury, Venus, or the Moon are placed, if they land right in the first house, victim's house, or seventh house, suspect's house, they can offer immediate insights into the victim or suspect's nature or their direct involvement.
And conversely, what might point towards, trouble, complications, or deception in the case?
Well, dynamic aspects, squares, oppositions, challenging angles between Mars, which represents action and evidence, and Mercury, representing communication and documentation, that can suggest obstacles, problems finding evidence, maybe communication breakdowns in the investigation. And any dynamic aspect involving Neptune is usually a big flashing light, a potential red flag for lies, deception, maybe addiction playing a significant role, or just really confusing, murky situation that obscures the truth. You also look at the overall condition, the strength of the ascendant ruler compared to the descendant ruler. Are they strong, weak in aspect? If they're conjunct, for example, it can literally indicate the victim and perpetrator met face-to-face. A square or opposition between them, that strongly signifies conflict.
It really is like learning a whole symbolic language, isn't it?
Okay.
Now the source dives into some more technical territory, things like out-of-bounds, planets, and declinations. This sounds like getting into the deeper astrological mechanics. Let's unpack this.
They are, yeah. A bit more technical, but central to this author's method. Let's start with declination. So, while we usually think of planets moving around the zodiac along the ecliptic, they also move north and south of the celestial equator. Declination is basically that north-south measurement. Think of it like celestial latitude.
Okay, got it. North-south position.
Exactly. And historically, some astrologers felt this was profoundly important. The source actually quotes Prophet Zadkiel saying the parallel aspect in declination is more important than all other aspects, and Nicholas Culpeper apparently called it the strongest aspect.
Wow, stronger than a conjunction. That's a pretty bold claim. Why would they think that? What is a parallel?
Right. It's strong stuff. The idea behind a parallel is that it means two planets are at the same celestial altitude, same declination north or south of the equator. It's not about their angle and longitude along the zodiac, but more like a deeper, maybe vibrational resonance, because they're level with each other. A parallel specifically is when they're on the same side, both north or both south, at the same altitude within a very tight orb, usually around 1.2 degrees. It's seen as this supercharged connection. A contraparallel is the same idea, same altitude, but they're on opposite sides, one north, one south. More like an energetic opposition or polarity.
Huh. Fascinating. A different dimension of connection. So what about this out of bounds thing then? OOB.
Okay, so a planet goes out of bounds, or OOB, when its declination, its north-south position, exceeds the sun's maximum possible declination. The sun, as it travels through the zodiac over the year, stays within a certain band, roughly 23 degrees and 27 minutes north or south of the celestial equator. But other planets, their orbits are tilted differently, so they can sometimes step outside this solar highway, go further north or south than the sun ever does.
And some planets never do that.
That's right. The source notes that Saturn, Chiron, and Neptune always stay in bounds. Their orbits keep them within the sun's declination limits. But planets like the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Uranus, and Pluto can go OEB, sometimes quite significantly. A moon can get up to maybe 28 degrees, Mars even further sometimes.
So what's the significance when a planet does go OOB? What does that mean in this context?
Well, the source offers two main perspectives that seem particularly relevant in crime analysis. One is the danger zone idea. Crossing those normal solar limits brings unpredictability, heightened risk, maybe recklessness, like venturing into uncharted waters where the usual rules don't apply. The other perspective is lawlessness. The planet is literally operating outside the usual boundaries, and this can sometimes correlate with behavior that is outside the law or societal norms. It suggests something or someone operating without the usual restraints or limits.
And what about asteroids? Do they play by these OOB rules?
Good question. The source is quite clear on this. Asteroids often have highly inclined orbits, so many of them are technically OOB quite often. Their OOB status in this framework only becomes really significant if that asteroid is in a tight parallel or contraparallel, that same altitude connection with a planet that is already OOB. The planet being OOB is the primary flag.
Okay, so it's the OOB planet that matters most, and an asteroid alignment just adds flavor if it connects.
Essentially, yes, that's how it's presented.
All right, boundary-breaking planets. Can you give us a feel for what that might look like for specific planets, based on the source's examples, maybe?
Sure. The source gives quite a few detailed examples. Let's see. Okay, OOB moon. This happens when the moon is in certain signs, and it tends to follow a roughly 9-year cycle. Natally, meaning in someone's birth chart, an OB moon can signify a really unconventional life path. Maybe forced travel, sometimes issues with the mother figure, or even psychological challenges, things like bipolar disorder are mentioned. For men, it can sometimes relate to unusual or even extreme relationships with women. The source contrasts Pierce Brosnan, who has one, showing intense unconventional devotion, with Scott Peterson, whose OB moon seemed to manifest in a much darker, destructive way relating to his wife. The source also lists OB moon appearing in charts connected to murder victims like Andrew Canberra, kidnapping cases like Catherine Beers, people who harm family like Genevieve Larmead or Dylan Pullis' family history, suicides like Kurt Cobain. It's a recurring theme in difficult situations. And a transiting OB moon, when the moon is OOB in the sky right now, is seen as a potentially dangerous period, particularly for women, where events can escalate suddenly or spiral unexpectedly.
Wow, that's quite a range. From devotion to darkness. What about Mercury?
OB Mercury. It occurs when Mercury is in Cancer, Gemini, Capricorn, or Sagittarius. People born with this are often described as having extraordinary intelligence, but maybe in an unusual way. Brilliant problem solvers, perhaps gifted with languages or very adept with their hands, manual skills. The potential downside: communication difficulties, maybe misunderstandings, or even risks associated with travel. The source gives a really chilling example. Stephen Hicks, who was Jeffrey Dahmer's first victim, he was hitchhiking travel risk with Mercury OOB when he encountered Dahmer. But it also lists positive examples like Dostoevsky or Gustav Eiffel, highlighting the genius aspect. It's not inherently negative, but it's outside the norm.
Okay. And Venus?
OOB Venus. Found when Venus is in Capricorn, Sagittarius, Scorpio, Taurus, Gemini, or Cancer. When Venus is transiting OOB, it's flagged as potentially dangerous for women, increasing vulnerability in Venus-ruled areas, beauty, relationships, finances. The source notes its presence in the charts for some notorious murder cases. Natally, in a birth chart, OB Venus can suggest unconventional tastes in relationships or aesthetics, maybe a rebellious approach, sort of ignoring traditional boundaries in love, art, or social settings, a kind of Uranian twist to Venus.
And Mars, the planet of action.
OEB Mars. Okay, it happens every year for maybe 2 or 2.5 months, but the source highlights the prolonged periods where Mars stays OOB for much longer, like 160 to 200 days. These are much rarer, happening maybe 10 times a century, and they correlate these prolonged OOB Mars periods with major, often violent, disruptive events on a societal scale. Chernobyl and 9/11 are given as examples occurring during such times. Natally, OB Mars can show incredibly strong willpower, but also impulsivity, maybe a dangerous temper if not channeled well. Figures like Bruce Lee or Jack London are mentioned to people known for unconventional, intense lives and debated, perhaps violent or self-destructive ends.
So those prolonged OOB Mars periods sound like major watch-out times globally.
That's the implication, yes. Heightened potential for conflict or disaster.
What about the outer planets, Jupiter?
OOB Jupiter. Found in certain signs like Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Leo, Virgo, Libra. Natally, it's often linked to unconventional views on religion, culture, philosophy, or the world in general. Sometimes associated with popularity, athleticism, or a strong pull towards extensive travel or foreign cultures. Catherine the Great is cited as an example for her radical shifts in religious policy in Russia.
And Pluto and Uranus.
OOB Pluto and Uranus. These are extremely rare events lasting for years when they happen. They tend to coincide with massive societal upheaval, revolutions, paradigm shifts. Think major historical turning points. In a natal chart, their OOB status is mainly considered significant if they form tight connections, like parallels, with one of the personal planets, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, or Mars. Otherwise, their impact is more generational.
Okay, so you can really see how this concept of exceeding normal celestial limits seems to echo or align with behavior or events that exceed normal limits down here on Earth. It adds very specific flavor.
It does. It suggests an energy operating without the usual checks and balances.
Now, the source also talks about something called antiscia and contra-antiscia. You describe them as hidden passageways and shadow opposites. This sounds like a layer of real subtlety. What exactly are these?
Right, they're a bit more abstract. Antiscia are points that are reflections of each other across the Cancer-Capricorn axis. It's the axis of the solstices, the longest and shortest days. Think of that 0 Cancer, 0 Capricorn line as a mirror. Planets that are at an equal distance from this mirror line on either side of it are in antiscia to each other. So, say a planet at 10 degrees Gemini would have its antiscia point at 20 degrees Cancer. It creates a kind of hidden connection, one that isn't obvious just by looking at the usual zodiac wheel positions, like a sympathetic vibration or a hidden link between those 2 points or planets.
Like a secret accomplice hiding in the chart. Is that the idea?
That's one way the source frames it in a crime analysis context, yes. It suggests potential clandestine ties or unspoken alliances. It might point towards a hidden accomplice or a silent collaborator whose role isn't immediately obvious but is somehow mirrored or connected through this reflection.
Okay. And contra antiscia, what's the difference?
Contra antiscia are also mirrored points, but they reflect across the same axis to the opposite side of the zodiac and opposite declination, one north, one south. So that 10 degrees Gemini point would have its contra antiscia at 20 degrees Sagittarius. The source suggests this signifies more of an overt antagonism or opposition, but one that might be disguised or operating under the surface, perhaps masked by neutrality. It's a connection of conflict, but again, one that's hidden or works in the shadows rather than being an open square or opposition aspect.
So how does a cosmic detective actually use these hidden connections? What kind of insights are they looking for?
They're presented as tools to uncover forensic insights that are less obvious, maybe things happening behind the scenes. They might point to secret timelines, actions happening in the shadows that mirror or influence the more public events, or reveal hidden motivations in someone's natal chart, underlying fears, unconscious drives, things that aren't readily apparent. Antiscia links between charts could suggest covert relationships, while contra antiscia might hint at that overt antagonism that's being disguised. And transits activating these sensitive points could signify unseen outcomes or developments emerging from hidden factors. The source gives examples like, say, Mars, planet of violence, and antiscia to Mercury, planet of communication. This might suggest the conflict or violence stemmed from an overheard conversation, something hidden. Or maybe Venus relationships, in contra antiscia to Saturn, restriction, could hint at a relationship ending under duress, with hidden issues or lingering antagonism beneath the surface.
It's like finding clues reflected in a dark mirror, isn't it? Very intriguing. And speaking of adding layers of detail, asteroids. The source talks about using asteroids, thousands of these little bodies floating around. They say asteroids can offer pinpoint insights. How on earth do they work them into a crime chart?
Yeah, this is where it gets incredibly specific. The source suggests looking for specific asteroids that resonate symbolically with the case details. This falls into 2 main categories. Asteroids named after the actual people involved, victims, suspects, key witnesses, even relevant place names sometimes. And secondly, asteroids with mythological or thematic significance that directly relates to the crime's nature, the method used, or the underlying motive.
Wait, so you'd literally look for an asteroid named Wilkerson if the victim's name was Wilkerson, or Daniel if that was the suspect?
Exactly that, yes. Or if the crime involves, say, poison, you might look for asteroids linked to toxins or maybe deception. If it was a drowning, maybe Ophelia, abuse, Nessus, arrogance playing a role, hybris, need for truth, veritas. The source lists quite a few used in their case studies. They name asteroids like Wilkerson, Daniel, Harun, Daria, Yusuf, Silvo, Elias, and object thematic ones like car for car, Phaeton, accidents, scarf, fast speed, children. Also mythological thematic ones like Nessus, abuse, lust, obsessive sexuality, Lucifer, Satanism, temptation, Laverna, theft, Typhon, destruction, Ganymede, youth exploitation, Algol, violent death, strangulation, Toro, violence, Sado, sadism. The symbolism is often derived directly from the asteroid's name or its associated myth. The source mentions using resources like astro.com, which has huge databases you can search.
That feels almost too specific, like you could find anything if you look hard enough. But I can see how if one of these aligns significantly, it could potentially add a very sharp focus to the analysis.
It's the idea presented. It's about finding convergences, multiple indicators pointing the same way.
Okay, to really see how all these tools, the rulers, the OOB planets, declinations, antiscia, asteroids, actually come together, the source provides several case studies. Let's maybe walk through a few of those to see this cosmic detective approach in action.
Great idea. Yeah, seeing them applied makes the concepts much clearer and, frankly, more compelling. Okay, let's start with the Usur Mumku assassination. This was back in 1993. He was a prominent Turkish journalist killed by a car bomb. So they cast the chart for the moment of the bombing. Now remember, the ascendant ruler represents the victim. In this chart, Mercury, the planet ruling writers and journalists, was the ascendant ruler. A very direct, powerful correlation right off the bat. The descendant ruler representing the perpetrators was Jupiter. The author connects Jupiter here to groups with strong religious or ethnic affiliations and also suggests potential involvement from intelligence agencies or political factions, given Jupiter's association with broader systems and beliefs.
So the rulers immediately pointed to the nature of the victim, a journalist, and the type of group potentially behind it.
That's the argument being made, yes. And then they add another layer, the fixed star Algorab, which has associations with terrorism, destructiveness, and deceit, was found conjunct Jupiter, the perpetrator's ruler. Adds a pretty chilling quality. Then, applying the asteroid layer, asteroids named Silentium, Silence, BAM, explosions, governmental role, MIT, a specific Turkish intelligence agency, Israel, a potential foreign link mentioned in theories, and Apophis, terror destruction, were all found aligned with key points in the chart. These added incredibly specific details that resonated with the method bombing, the victim silencing, and some of the alleged players or context discussed around the case. And there's more. The chart showed Mars, representing the action or the instrument of violence, was retrograde and out of bounds in the sign Cancer. Retrograde can suggest something hidden, perhaps planned beforehand or involving betrayal. OOB, as we discussed, means operating outside normal limits. And Cancer rules the home or dwelling. So the source interprets OE Mars in Cancer as suggesting a violent, boundary-breaking action originating at his home, likely planned from within the country. Its dynamic aspects to Neptune, deception, confusion, Uranus, shock, suddenness, and that Israel asteroid further amplified the sense of shocking victimization and hinted at those complex, possibly external dimensions.
It's really remarkable how many specific details they seem to link directly to the celestial patterns in that case. Okay, what about the D. Wilkerson missing person case? That sounded quite different.
But yes, a more recent case from 2020. A disappearance, nobody found, but a known suspect named Daniel. They analyzed the chart for the last seen moment. Here, Jupiter was the ascendant ruler, representing the victim, D. Wilkerson. The source immediately highlights that Jupiter was surrounded by challenging planets, Pluto, power, death, and Saturn, restrictions, endings. They call this a dire sign for the victim's survival prospects. Meanwhile, Mercury, the descendant ruler, represented the suspect, Daniel. Mercury was placed in the 7th house, which is traditionally the house associated with the descendant, the other person. So it places the suspect strongly on their own turf in the chart. Very prominent.
And did the name asteroids show up here too, like Wilkerson and Daniel?
Yes, powerfully. The asteroid named Wilkerson, victim, and the asteroid named Daniel, suspect, were both found in significant alignments in the chart. It's quite striking. Other asteroids like Lie, Pluto, again, Nessus, abuse coercion, and Saturn also aligned, reinforcing themes of deception, potential violence, and a grim outcome. And notice this pattern, the presence of an out-of-bounds moon, OOB Mercury, and the OOB Lie asteroid. Again, that signature of boundary-breaking behavior, heightened danger, and deception being central to the event. So, based on all these combined factors, the malefic planets around the victim's ruler, the suspect prominent, the OOB indicators, the specific name asteroids, the Lie asteroid, the source concludes it's highly improbable the victim is alive and that Daniel was almost certainly lying about his involvement.
The direct connection via the name asteroids is really quite arresting in these examples. It feels almost literal.
It really is presented as a key technique for adding that specificity. Let's look at another one. The murder in a love triangle case. This involves several people. Hatis, Ramazan, Yusuf, who was the victim, Harun, who confessed to being the killer, and Daria. There was an affair, a marriage, jealousy. Yusuf disappeared. CCTV footage and Harun's eventual confession revealed he stabbed Yusuf. Okay, the last seen chart for Yusuf had Libra rising on the ascendant. Libra is the sign of relationships, partnerships, so that immediately focuses the chart on the relationship dynamics. Venus, ruling Libra, represented the victim, Yusuf, and Venus was squared by Pluto, a very harsh aspect, often indicating power struggles, jealousy, destruction within relationships. Mars, ruling Aries, which was on the descendant, represented the killer, Harun. And Mars was placed right in the 7th house, again putting the suspect prominently in their zone in the chart.
So again, like the Wilkerson case, the rulers and their placement immediately set the stage for victim and perpetrator within the context this time, relationships.
Yes. And critically, just like Wilkerson, the name asteroids were incredibly prominent. Asteroids named Hatis, Ramazan, Harun, Daria, and Yusuf, plus Lie, Pluto, and Nessus all featured significantly, directly linking the individuals involved and the core themes of the crime. And again, we see the OOB moon, OOB Mercury and the Lie asteroid featuring, emphasizing that boundary-breaking behavior, deception, and heightened emotional state within this messy relationship drama. One more detail. The ascendant ruler, Venus victim, and descendant ruler, Mars killer, were in parallel in declination to Jupiter. Remember, Jupiter exaggerates things. This suggested an amplified, almost theatrical conflict, Jupiter's influence, that escalated tragically. So the chart elements, including those stunningly specific name asteroids and indicators of deception, conflict, and OE planets, strongly aligned with Haroon's confessed motive jealousy, feeling trapped, and the violent outcome.
It really does feel like the cosmic chart in these analyses is telling the story of the relationships and the crime itself. Okay, what about a famous historical figure? Someone with a life full of drama and accidents, like Isadora Duncan.
Isadora Duncan, the revolutionary dancer. Her life was certainly marked by both artistic boundary-breaking and profound personal tragedy, the loss of her children in an accident, her own infamous, bizarre death by scarf entanglement in a car. The source looks at her natal chart first. They find asteroid Terpsichore, the muse of dance, conjunct her moon, reflecting her core identity and vocation. Makes sense. Her sun conjunct Mercury was found exactly at the midpoint between Saturn, structure, tradition, and Uranus, rebellion, shock. The source links this directly to her rebellious nature, challenging dance norms, having children out of wedlock, living freely. Her chart also features a challenging pattern called a grand square, which is often seen as indicating significant life challenges, maybe repeated crises or accident potential. And her moon was out of bounds, which the source connects to her unconventional and ultimately tragic experience of motherhood, losing both her children.
And the asteroids, did specific ones show up for her too?
Oh yes, specific asteroids aligned with key points in her natal chart, particularly points involved in that grand square pattern. They found car, phaeton, accidents, recklessness, scarf, fast speed, and children. These were found in significant aspects or conjunctions, cosmically marking the very themes that would tragically define her life and end cars, accidents, speed, her children, and even the specific instrument of her own death, the scarf. Then, they look at the chart for her fatal accident itself, September 14th, 1927. The moon in that chart was conjunct the fixed star Hemel, associated with sudden, unpredictable, often violent events, and crucially, asteroids Phaeton, accidents, Neptune, inattention, confusion, maybe intoxication, and Scarf, were all tightly aligned in the accident chart. The force reads this cluster with devastating simplicity. An accident, Phaeton, caused by inattention, Neptune, involving a scarf, plus a Mars-Mercury opposition aspect to Uranus-Jupiter depicted as sudden, Uranus-exaggerated Jupiter, violent Mars accident involving communication thought, Mercury, and travel, Mars-Jupiter. And there were powerful zero-degree declination alignments involving Mercury, Uranus, and Mars. These 0 points are considered highly potent and sensitive, multiple indicators converging.
That specific alignment of Phaeton, Neptune, and Scarf in the accident chart, it's almost eerily descriptive. It really makes you pause and think.
It does. It's presented as a powerful example of how multiple astrological factors, fixed stars, asteroids, planetary aspects, declinations, can converge to describe the unique specifics of a single tragic event.
Let's shift gears to a really dark case, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. His crimes were just horrific. What does his chart supposedly show, according to this framework?
Analyzing Richard Ramirez's natal chart, born February 28, 1960, the source highlights several really extreme indicators that they link directly to his horrific behavior. His sun in Pisces was conjunct the asteroid Lust and squared asteroid Toro, violence, pointing immediately to harsh sexual energy and aggression. A Sun-Pluto opposition suggests ruthlessness, power obsession, and potentially cruel fantasies. His moon was at the very end of Pisces, the 29th degree, which is considered a critical, unstable degree. It was conjunct the challenging fixed star Sheet, and also asteroids like Melancholia, RIP, and Flood, all carrying heavy themes of doom, sadness, mental turmoil, chaos, and death. Mars, planet of aggression, was conjunct fixed star Algete, sometimes linked to negative outcomes, and square Neptune, illusion, perversion, addiction, seen as indicating a drive for domination fueled by perverse fantasy.
And the Satanism link.
Yes. Crucially, the asteroid Lucifer, directly linked to temptation, rebellion, and in his case, Satanism, formed significant aspects in his chart. It was trine Pluto, power obsession, square Mars, aggression, and contraparallel Jupiter, his belief system. The source connects this configuration directly to his professed satanic ideology and his actions. Also, asteroid Cetido, for sadism, was square his Sun-Mercury conjunction, core identity thoughts, and contraparallel Venus lover relationships, linking sadistic thoughts directly to his self-concept and a cruel distortion of connection or affection. The source basically argues that these combined elements painted a chillingly accurate cosmic portrait that aligned with his incredibly violent, sadistic, satanic crimes and his deeply disturbed mental state.
It certainly sounds like his chart was just screaming red flags, according to this methodology.
That's definitely the argument presented, that some individuals appear to carry exceptionally challenging or volatile cosmic signatures from birth.
Okay, let's look at one more case study, the Mohammed Januzi abduction. This was that terribly sad case, the little boy taken from a refugee camp crowd.
Yes, a 4-year-old boy abducted from a large, chaotic crowd in Berlin in 2015. The perpetrator was later identified as Silvio S., and tragically, he was also linked to the murder of another young boy named Elias. They cast the chart for the last seen moment of Muhammad. Sagittarius was rising, making Jupiter the ruler representing the victim, the child, as Jupiter also relates to youth. Mercury became the ruler representing the suspect, the kidnapper. Jupiter, victim, was found conjunct Mars, violence, action, and asteroid Apophis, chaos, destruction, and it was opposite Neptune, victimhood, confusion, disappearance. The source reads this as vividly depicting the violent abduction, Mars, happening amidst the chaos and confusion, Apophis, the Neptune of the crowd. Asteroid Proserpina, which is mythologically linked to abduction or kidnapping, was part of a major challenging pattern, a grand square in the chart. Very symbolic.
And the name asteroids again? For the people involved, Silvio, Elias.
Yes, highly prominent and incredibly descriptive here. Asteroid child, confirming the victim's age category. Asteroid Ganymede, mythologically linked to the abduction of youth, sometimes exploitation. And crucially, asteroid Silvo, the suspect's name, were all found in challenging aspects, squares or oppositions to Jupiter, the victim's ruler. This directly links the suspect's identity, Silvo, to the child victim, child Jupiter, and the conflict, squares oppositions. Adding to the grim picture, the moon in the chart was conjunct the fixed star Algol. Algol has one of the most malefic reputations, strongly associated with violence, losing one's head, literally or figuratively, low survival odds, and specifically strangulation. Tragically, this correlated with the eventual discovery of the victim's cause of death.
Oh, that's chilling.
It is. Mercury, representing the suspect Silvio S., had aspects, like a square to Pluto, a 150-degree aspect to Neptune, suggesting manipulative, covert, possibly deceptive intentions. And significantly, Mercury was retrograde. In this context, the source interprets retrograde as indicating repeated wrongdoing, something recurring. This astrologically connects Silvio S. to his prior victim, Elias. And in one final chilling detail, the asteroid Elias was found conjunct the asteroid Silvo in this abduction chart, astrologically linking the two murders directly via the perpetrator in the chart of the second crime.
Wow. That connection between the suspect's name asteroid, the previous victim's name asteroid, and the suspect's ruler being retrograde, that is incredibly specific and quite haunting.
These cases, as presented in the source, really showcase how they layer all the different techniques, the planetary rulers, the OOB status, fixed stars, those specific name asteroids, thematic asteroid key aspects, declinations to build this complex picture that, they argue, resonates deeply with the real-world details of these often terrible events. And just one last tool the source briefly touches on is degree theory, specifically mentioning Nicholas Stojanovic's system. The basic idea is that each of the 360 degrees of the zodiac has its own specific symbolic meaning or flavor. So if a key planet in a crime chart, say the victim's ruler, maybe Mercury again landed on, let's say, the second degree of Pisces. And so Stojanovic's theory links that degree specifically to themes of drugs or entanglement of facts and falsehoods. Well, that specific degree could add another layer of interpretive context to understanding the case, suggesting maybe drug trafficking was involved, or that deception is making the facts very hard to untangle.
This has been an incredibly deep dive into a truly complex and definitely unconventional field, layering all these techniques from the fundamentals of timing and rulers to subtle things like declinations and hidden antiscia, then adding specific asteroids, fixed stars, even individual degree meanings. It creates a fascinatingly detailed, if maybe challenging, picture. So for someone listening now who's just processed all this dense information, what's the big takeaway? What does it all mean?
I think the biggest takeaway, as presented by the source, is that this approach offers an additional lens, a different way of looking at complex human events, particularly crimes. It provides a unique framework for trying to identify potential patterns, timing indicators, maybe cosmic red flags that might correlate with motive, method, opportunity, things like that. And while it's stressed that this isn't evidence you can take to court, it offers a different perspective for inquiry, for investigation, drawing on, well, thousands of years of observing the sky and looking for patterns.
It's definitely a shortcut to being well-informed on this very specific niche topic, isn't it? Full of surprising connections and maybe some aha moments you really wouldn't find anywhere else. else, it shows just how deeply you can explore a subject when you're willing to look beyond the obvious and combine seemingly unrelated fields like astronomy and crime analysis.
Absolutely. And the source concludes with a perspective that tries to elevate the work beyond just, solving mysteries or pointing fingers. It suggests that the ultimate goal, perhaps, in understanding this potential interplay of cosmic forces and human decisions is striving for greater awareness, compassion, and ultimately prevention. The idea is that seeing these patterns, even if you don't accept them as absolute causal proof, might prompt a deeper reflection on the complex forces that could influence human behavior, for better or worse.
That's actually quite a profound way to end this. It leaves you thinking, doesn't it? How might looking upward, considering the positions of planets and stars at a particular moment, potentially change the way you think about human behavior, individual choices, and the incredibly complex web of factors that lead to major, sometimes tragic, events? This deep dive has certainly given us, and hopefully you, a fascinating new tool for inquiry, or at least for thought.